On paper, the Borderlands universe should feel far removed from our own reality. Humanity has settled multiple star systems, ancient aliens have left behind mysterious vaults, sirens wield supernatural powers, and weapon manufacturers are powerful enough to own entire armies, and even entire planets. And yet, despite all of these fantastical elements, the universe feels strangely familiar. Characters speak recognizable languages, reference well-known myths, and allude to cultural movements that feel surprisingly grounded. After encountering these details across multiple games, they start to feel less like coincidences and more like remnants. It's never stated outright, but eventually the question becomes unavoidable. Did Earth exist in Borderlands? And if it did, or if it didn't, what does it actually mean for the universe and the people living in it? In this video, I want to examine the evidence suggesting why Earth may have existed, the reasons it might not have, and what its fate could have been if it did. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So if Earth did exist, what clues does the Borderlands universe have to indicate it? Well, one of the strongest pieces of evidence is from the very first scene in Borderlands. When Marcus speaks of the legend of the Vault, a young Brick is seen holding a dog. We never see the dog throughout the game, but Nisha does confirm its existence in Borderlands 2 when she's gloating about how killing it sent Brick into a rage. Cats are depicted even more plainly. Hyperion co-founder Al-Maharan is shown carrying a white Persian cat in the pre-sequel. Amara is repeatedly associated with feline imagery, earning titles like the Wild Cat and the Tiger of Partali, and there's even a quest in Borderlands 4 that revolves around tracking down a citizen's lost cat.
Hey, Mr. Miles, how you doing?
You gotta go home, dude.
It isn't just notable that these animals exist, it's also notable that we never encountered them in the wild. On any given planet in the 6 galaxies, you might see skags, spider ants, or ratches, but never a domesticated cat or dog. That suggests they aren't native to any of those planets. Yet, everyone seems to have a larger understanding of what cats and dogs are. So the natural conclusion one would draw is that they came from elsewhere, as they seem to be ingrained in human culture across multiple planets. But Earth animals aren't the only thing ingrained in human culture. Nearly every major planet and several corporations in Borderlands reference Earth-based mythological systems. The most pervasive is ancient Greek mythology. Planets such as Pandora, Kairos, Promethea, and Hermes are all named after Greek gods and culture, and the names seem deliberate as well. The chaotic planet of Pandora is named after the woman who unleashed evils upon the world. Kairos, which has the last moment in time, is named after the right or critical moment, and Promethea is named after the Titan who shared forbidden knowledge with humanity to jumpstart civilization, much like how Atlas was the first company to harness ancient alien technology to gain an advantage. These names are just too on the nose to be coincidental. Speaking of Atlas, it's one of several weapon manufacturers, along with Hyperion and Daedalus, that borrow their names from Greek mythology. Atlas even leans directly into that symbolism. In Tales from the Borderlands, one of the company's headquarters visually mirrors the myth of Atlas himself, literally holding up the weight of the world. And every leader in Atlas's now defunct Omega Squad was named after Greek and Roman deities as well, from Athena and Hera to Minerva and Ceresia. What's interesting is that these myths are rarely explained in the universe. Some characters seem to have a loose understanding of some of them, but not enough to directly attribute them to their earthly origins. For example, Zero references a story of Icarus, and the entire cast of characters has grown to realize that Mercenary Day is analogous to Christmas. Vex even says she doesn't celebrate Mercenary Day because she celebrates the 8 Nights of Candles instead, a thinly veiled reference to Hanukkah. But still, we see direct evidence of modern Earth religions everywhere. The planets of Eden and Gehenna reference Judeo-Christian concepts of paradise and damnation. The Children of the Vault, the central antagonists of Borderlands 3, build ornate temples filled with stained glass and iconography that unmistakably echoes Christian cathedrals. Their worship of Tyreen mirrors the structure of organized religion, even if the deity itself is new. And on Athenas, the Order of the Impending Storm draws heavily from Buddhist influence, between its architecture to its emphasis on restraint and non-violence. So all in all, we the players can see that, at the very least, a lot of Earth mythology and its concepts live on, even if their origins and context aren't directly mentioned. And while we're on the subject of Earth concepts, Borderlands also has one of the most persistent elements of culture: language. All of the characters speak English, which in isolation could easily be dismissed as a localization choice for the audience. But Borderlands doesn't stop there. Characters regularly speak and reference other Earth languages and countries. The most prevalent is Spanish. Mordecai, Salvador, and Rafa are all playable characters that regularly speak in Spanish. Mordecai and Salvador are even considered Truxican, a fictional nationality that clearly borrows from Mexican culture, complete with Spanish language roots and culinary references. Meanwhile, Nurse Nina frequently speaks in Russian, and Zero speaks in haiku, a poetic form originating in Japan. And the Katagawa family, despite never speaking it, share visual and cultural traits that strongly suggest Japanese ancestry. Janie Springs is also explicitly aware of her Australian accent, even jokingly switching to an American one while listing stereotypes in Land Among the Stars. These moments only work if those distinctions still mean something in universe. But sometimes the references aren't mere suggestions. Sometimes they're shockingly direct. In Borderlands 1, Patricia Tannis matter-of-factly describes Helena Pierce as having a British accent. Tiny Tina also casually refers to one of her imaginary Tea Party guests as Welsh. And Vladov, a manufacturer deeply inspired by Soviet Russia, uses the USSR's national anthem in its promotional material. Moses' skill tree even includes a skill called Russian Offensive, a pun that only makes sense if the cultural context still exists. And in a somewhat deep cut, Canada is actually mentioned outright in the quest Out-of-Body Experience.
New card, debit card, 1538 the pin number for my heart, but it doesn't really work in Canada.
But the pattern doesn't just apply to countries, it extends into astronomy itself. One of the most iconic mini-bosses in the series is Saturn. On its own, that could be waved away as another mythological reference, but in Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary, players encounter a second boss, Uranus. And yes, it was probably partially motivated by the opportunity to make this joke, but it also clearly shows that this was meant to allude to the Milky Way. Yes, Saturn and Uranus are Roman and Greek gods respectively, but they're also planets. And more importantly, they're planets in a specific order. Hyperion has a long history of naming assets after Greek mythology, but here it suddenly switches to Roman names, and does so sequentially. That choice only makes sense if the loader line was in reference to our solar system. Typhon de Leon also provides another telling moment. In one of his logs, he references a movie from before the expansion where two giant monsters fight in a city, clearly alluding to King Kong vs. Godzilla. This isn't myth, it's pop culture, and it's pop culture that only exists if Earth's media history exists as well. Taken individually, these moments could be dismissed as jokes or Easter eggs. Borderlands is certainly full of them, but taken together, across multiple games, writers, and eras, they form a pattern that's hard to ignore. The overwhelming amount of evidence seems to indicate that Earth did exist. There's just one problem: Randy Pitchford. On two separate occasions, he's gone on the record to say that Earth does not exist in Borderlands. The first came in September of 2018 when he stated on social media, "There's no Earth, but its research exists." Years later, in an interview with Maxi Greek in October 2025, he reiterated the point, explaining that this is why the series uses Mercenary Day instead of Christmas. Historically, Gearbox has rarely given definitive lore statements like this. So, on the surface, Randy Pitchford outright confirming this multiple times seems pretty open and shut. But even if we ignore these statements, there's still a strong counterargument to be had for Earth's non-existence. In Digistruct Peak, Tannis describes Saturn as a complete nonsense word, which is pretty damning considering she's one of the smartest archaeologists in Borderlands. Plus, the games themselves are also deliberately coy with what is canon, even making jokes about the inconsistencies and the canon status of certain events, like the island of Dr. Ned. And considering there's a quest where you can jump off a cliff at Handsome Jack's request, we know that most side content isn't meant to be certified lore. Otherwise, the Borderlands timeline would be a complete mess. The reality is, Borderlands is tonally very silly, and to no one's surprise, the actual writers are from Earth. Most references can be chalked up to silly jokes and Easter eggs rather than proof of an in-universe Earth. And when the franchise's most authoritative voice says Earth doesn't exist, it's easy to assume the debate is over. Or is it? I found Randy Pitchford's comments tough to swallow. After all, I just outlined a bunch of reasons why Earth should have existed. And then, when I attempted to reconcile this dissonance, I realized that he actually chose his words pretty carefully. Let's look at them again. In 2018, he said, "There's no Earth, but its research exists." Then, later in 2025, he says, "There is no Earth in the Borderlands." In neither statement does he say Earth never existed, just that it's not around currently. Plus, in 2025, he said there is no Earth in the Borderlands. He didn't say that Earth doesn't exist in Borderlands, as in the franchise. The setting of the Borderlands primarily refers to the specific region of space the games take place, the cluster of 6 galaxies humanity rapidly colonized after mastering faster-than-light travel. Saying Earth isn't in the Borderlands doesn't necessarily mean it never existed elsewhere. It may simply mean it's no longer part of the story being told. Even more telling is the phrase, "its research exists." If Earth's research survived, then Earth itself must have existed at some point, even if it no longer does. As for Tannis, her dismissal of Saturn as a nonsense word says more about her priorities than reality. Tannis is an archaeologist, but she specializes in Iridian culture and technology. Ancient human history holds little relevance to her work. If Earth lies beyond the regions humanity currently inhabits, or it no longer affects vaults, sirens, or corporate power, then it makes sense that no one studies it anymore. Which leads to a more compelling explanation, one that reconciles both the evidence and the official statements. Earth existed, but it's faded from memory, made obsolete by its irrelevance. The most relevant planet that functions as the narrative center to the universe is the first one we've set foot on in the series, Pandora. But Pandora was never humanity's first world. By the time the series begins, humans have already been traveling the stars for generations. Exactly how long is deliberately unclear. The Worlds of Borderlands book explicitly states that the chronology of human history is vague, even by in-universe standards. What we do know is that humanity mastered superluminal travel around 3 centuries before the events of Borderlands 4, triggering a rapid and chaotic period of interstellar expansion. But there's evidence that humans were spacefaring long before that. Zadra, for example, claimed she was aboard the first ship to land on Kairos roughly 1,000 years ago, implying there may have been slower-moving generational ships before the colonial era. Regardless, things have been extremely turbulent since its discovery. The rapid expansion gave corporations the resources and agency to overthrow the central galactic government and then wage war against one another. So, figuring out superluminal travel was by far the biggest event in human history, to the point where it acted like a giant reset. And that's why the Worlds of Borderlands puts it as the first event in the Borderlands timeline. And as a result, lots of historical records and knowledge were likely lost as humanity adjusted to a bunch of new environments and their chaotic corporate overlords. That's all to say that a lot of time has passed, and a lot of cataclysmic events have reshaped human history. Enough time and enough chaos for humanity to potentially forget its origin planet altogether. Put simply, humanity has bigger fish to fry and has moved on. That said, aspects of olden times still live on in ways that the majority of us aren't aware of. You probably didn't know that barber poles are red, white, and blue because they signified the establishment participated in bloodletting and other medical procedures in the Middle Ages, nor that the phrase "dead as a doornail" is derived from medieval carpentry. There are a plethora of phrases and folklore that are used in our everyday vernacular that people don't know the etymology of. The point is, lots of bits and pieces of our culture have been preserved in unexpected ways over the centuries. It's not far-fetched to think that being Mexican could morph into becoming Truxican, or that Christmas could have become Mercenary Day. So even if Earth is a long-forgotten memory, it doesn't mean it never existed. That said, we will probably never have actual confirmation whether Earth existed in Borderlands. Gearbox has been intentionally vague for nearly 2 decades, and that ambiguity is likely by design. It preserves the series' tone, keeps the universe flexible, and avoids anchoring Borderlands too firmly to our own reality. It's also entirely possible that this is a parallel universe where Earth never existed at all, and culture simply evolved in eerily similar ways. However, given all the evidence that there is for it, and how carefully Randy Pitchford chooses his words while debunking it, I think it's very likely to have existed at one point. But even if it did, it's clear that in this universe, humanity itself has moved on, just like how most people nowadays have moved on from caring about ancient Maya or Mesopotamia. As for what happened to it, I think this exchange sums it up nicely.
So, you're from off-planet. What is it like out there? It's been a long time.
How do I say this? Corporations run everything. Everyone else gets squeezed for every cent they have. You either die in debt or die paying it off.
Not so different from how I remember it.
If Earth did exist, its fate probably wasn't noble or tragic, just familiar. Like every other planet in the series, it was likely stripped for resources, hollowed out by corporate greed, and abandoned once it stopped being profitable. Companies like Dahl, Hyperion, and Atlas have all done it before. The fact that Earth may have been humanity's home planet wouldn't have spared it. It just would have made it the first casualty. But even if the planet itself is gone, its legacy isn't. Language survives, myths survive, cultural oddities survive. Even if they're stripped of their context, humanity remembers just enough of their essence to carry them forward anyways. But culture isn't the only thing humanity is good at preserving. Just like its customs, humanity carries its constants with it too. Violence, greed, and the inevitable looting and shooting that ensues. So maybe the real question isn't whether Earth existed in Borderlands. Maybe it's whether it even matters. Because even if the planet is long gone, humanity clearly isn't done repeating its mistakes. So wherever humans go next, they'll bring their culture, their myths, and most importantly, their guns. That's all for now. Do you think Earth existed? Do you have ideas on its fate? Let me know in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe. Otherwise, you'll get coal for Mercenary Day. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye.